Millionaire stops when he sees a beggar with a baby and realizes the blanket is his. He just wanted to cross the light in silence, like he did every day. But in that moment, something made him stop. It wasn't the baby in the beggar's arms. It was the blanket. Light blue, hand-stitched. The same one his wife had sewn for the daughter he never saw again. 6 years. 6 long years since the abduction shattered everything. And now, standing before a stranger and a red light, the past returns wrapped in faded fabric. And nothing will ever be the same. The rain tapped gently against the windshield of Michael Drake's Tesla as he waited at the intersection of Michigan and Wacker Drive. Chicago's skyline disappeared into a gray mist above him. At 47, Michael had mastered the art of multitasking. One hand on the wheel, the other holding his phone, his voice crisp and cold as he spoke to his CFO. "The quarterly numbers aren't acceptable, James. Make the cuts we discussed. I don't care about the families. I care about shareholders." The light remained stubbornly red. Michael glanced impatiently to his right, where a hooded figure stood in the rain, cradling what appeared to be a baby. Just another panhandler, he thought, turning away. He'd seen hundreds like her before. But then, as the figure shifted, something caught his eye, a flash of pale blue. It wasn't the woman that made his heart stop. It was the blanket wrapped around the infant, light blue with hand-stitched stars along the border. Images flooded his mind. Rachel's pale hands working the needle through the fabric. Her whispered promise as she sewed each star. "So our baby will always find her way home. Sir? Are you still there?" The voice in his earpiece faded into white noise. Michael ended the call without a word. 6 years ago, his infant daughter Lily had been taken from their home. 6 years of private investigators, false leads, and emptiness. Without thinking, he threw open his car door and stepped into the rain. "Where did you get that blanket?" His voice was a strangled whisper as he approached the woman. She jerked back, clutching the baby protectively. "What?" "The blanket. Where did you get it?" His voice rose, drawing stares from pedestrians. The woman, barely more than a girl, really, blinked raindrops from her lashes. "I didn't steal it, if that's what you're saying. I need to know where it came from." Michael's voice broke. "The baby came with it," she said defensively. "Left at the shelter door months ago. I'm just taking care of him until—" She trailed off. Cars honked behind them. The light had changed. "What's your name?" Michael asked, softening his tone. "Clarissa," she replied cautiously. He reached for the edge of the blanket with trembling fingers. There, in the corner, was a small fabric tag with hand-embroidered letters. Lily Drake. Something inside Michael shattered like glass. The sound that escaped him wasn't quite human. "Sir, are you okay?" Clarissa asked, backing away slightly. Michael looked from the blanket to the baby's face. Rounded cheeks, clear eyes watching him with innocent curiosity. "That blanket belonged to my daughter," he whispered. "She was kidnapped 6 years ago." Clarissa's eyes widened. "I swear I didn't—" A bus splashed past, drenching them both. When Michael looked up again, Clarissa was running, disappearing into the crowd, taking with her the only real connection to Lily he'd seen in 6 years. 6 years earlier, Rachel Drake sat in the nursery rocking chair, her thin fingers working a needle through pale blue fabric despite the doctor's orders to rest. At 39, her pregnancy had been high risk, but their daughter's birth had brought pure joy, a miracle they'd nearly given up hoping for. "You shouldn't be doing this," Michael had said, watching from the doorway. "The doctors said—" "Doctors don't know everything," Rachel interrupted, her voice soft but determined. "My mother made a blanket for me, and her mother for her. Every stitch is a prayer for protection." Michael had rolled his eyes. "It's a blanket, Rachel, not a shield." Her words returned to him now as he sat in his penthouse, staring at the storm battering his windows. After Lily's disappearance, Rachel had fallen into silence, her body weakening alongside her will to live. The doctors called it heart failure, but Michael knew better. His wife had died of a broken heart just months after losing their daughter. He'd never told anyone about that final argument. While he was packing for a business trip, Rachel had begged him to stay home, saying she had a terrible feeling. "You always have a feeling," he'd snapped. "You're living in the past, Rachel. My mother walked out. That doesn't mean someone's going to take Lily." Those were the last words he'd spoken to his wife before leaving. That night, the new babysitter had stepped outside for just 2 minutes to take a call. When she returned, Lily's crib was empty. The security cameras had been disabled. The alarm system somehow bypassed. The police had questions, but no answers. The trail went cold within days. Michael became consumed with finding her. He hired the best private investigators, offered a reward that grew to $5 million, appeared on national television pleading for information. Nothing. Eventually, the world moved on, as it always does. His company flourished, his bank account swelled, and the hole in his heart remained unfilled. He'd never removed a single item from the nursery. Lily's clothes still hung in the closet. Her toys sat on shelves, gathering dust. And the matching blue blanket, the one Rachel had made before becoming too weak to finish, lay folded in the crib, waiting for its twin to return. Now, Michael paced his living room like a caged animal. He tried calling the police, but what could he say? That a homeless woman had a blanket that looked like his daughter's? They'd write him off as another rich man losing his grip. He pulled up his contacts and found Rogers, his most reliable investigator, calling despite the late hour. "I need you to find someone," Michael said, without preamble. "A young woman named Clarissa, homeless, probably early 20s, taking care of a baby. She was at Michigan and Wacker this morning." He hung up and walked to the window, staring out at the city lights blurred by rain. The past wasn't just knocking at his window anymore, it had crashed through it entirely, leaving glass shards everywhere he stepped. His phone buzzed with a text from Rogers. "Need more to go on." Description? Michael closed his eyes, forcing himself to recall details. Dark hair, thin face, a small scar near her right eye. And then he remembered something else. As she'd turned to run, he'd glimpsed writing on her weathered backpack. St. Jude's Community Church, South Side. He grabbed his keys. Some things you had to do yourself. St. Jude's Community Church stood like a stone sentinel in one of Chicago's toughest neighborhoods. The once red brick had faded to the color of dried blood, and iron bars protected stained glass windows depicting scenes of resurrection. Michael parked his Tesla a block away, knowing it would draw too much attention. Rain had given way to a damp chill as evening settled over the city. He pulled his collar up, less for warmth than to obscure his face. The last thing he needed was recognition. A handful of people milled around the church steps, most clutching styrofoam cups of something hot. Michael approached a gaunt man with a gray beard. "I'm looking for Clarissa," he said quietly. "Young woman, with a baby." The man's eyes narrowed. "What's your business with her?" "I'm an old family friend," Michael lied smoothly. "I've been trying to find her." "Sure you have," the man muttered, but nodded toward the church doors. "Father Tom might know." Inside, the sanctuary smelled of incense and damp wool. A priest in his 60s was stacking hymnals, his movements deliberate and unhurried. "Excuse me," Michael called. "Father Tom?" The priest turned, studying Michael with shrewd eyes. "We don't get many suits around here," he said. collection box is by the door, if that's what you're looking for." "I'm looking for Clarissa. And a baby." Father Tom's expression hardened. "And you are?" "Michael Drake. I met Clarissa this morning. We need to talk." Recognition flickered across the priest's face. "Drake Technologies. I've read about you." His tone made it clear the reading hadn't been favorable. "What does a billionaire want with one of our shelter residents?" Before Michael could answer, a door opened at the back of the sanctuary. Clarissa stepped through, the baby bundled against her chest. She froze when she saw Michael. "It's okay," Father Tom called to her. "Just stay there." But Michael was already moving past the priest, his eyes fixed on the blue blanket. "Please," he said, softer now. "I just need to understand. That blanket belonged to my daughter." Clarissa shifted the baby to her hip. Up close, Michael could see the child had clear blue eyes, like Rachel's, like Lily's. "I told you," Clarissa said warily. "He was left at the shelter door. The blanket came with him." "When? Where? There must have been something else. A note, a person." "There wasn't." Her voice hardened. "Just a baby in a box with this blanket. That's all I know." Michael reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. $5,000. Cash. "Just tell me what else you know." Clarissa's eyes flashed. "I don't want your money. You think because I'm poor, I must be lying? Or desperate enough to sell what little I know?" Father Tom stepped between them. "I think you should leave, Mr. Drake." "Not until I get answers," Michael's voice echoed off the vaulted ceiling. "Deal with your own pain before invading others," Clarissa snapped, turning away. "Some of us don't have the luxury of buying our way out of grief." Father Tom firmly escorted Michael to the door, making it clear he wasn't welcome back. Outside, rain had started again. Michael sat in his car, watching the church. Hours passed. The lights dimmed. Most people left. Near midnight, a side door opened. Clarissa stepped out alone, glancing around before approaching a wall sheltered from the rain. She pulled something from her pocket. Chalk, Michael realized, and began writing on the brick. He squinted through the windshield to make out the words, "Lily D. Forever Safe." Morning light filtered through the blinds of Michael's downtown office as he reviewed the preliminary report on his desktop. Winston, his most expensive private investigator, had compiled everything available on Clarissa Wilson, 28 years old. 2 arrests for drug possession. Last known address, a shelter in Englewood. Clean for 27 months, according to probation records. What the report didn't explain was how she'd come into possession of his daughter's blanket, or why she'd written Lily's name on the church wall. Michael rubbed his temples. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that blue blanket and felt the crushing weight of possibility. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Drake, your 9:30 is here." "Cancel it," he said. "Cancel everything today." An hour later, he was back at St. Jude's, this time wearing jeans and a plain jacket, less conspicuous than yesterday's tailored suit. The church was quieter in the morning, just a few people coming and going from the attached community center. He found Clarissa in a small courtyard behind the building, sitting on a bench while the baby crawled on a blanket spread over the grass. Not the blue blanket, he noted. That one was tucked around the child's shoulders, despite the mild day. She tensed when she saw him. "I told Father Tom you might come back." "I'm not here to cause trouble," Michael said, remaining at a distance. "But if you won't take money, at least hear me out." "Fine. Talk." Her eyes never left the baby, who was intently studying a fallen leaf. 6 years ago, my 3-month-old daughter was taken from her crib. My wife died shortly after. Michael's voice caught. That blanket, the one around him right now, was made by her. Clarissa's expression softened slightly. I've spent years searching, he continued. That blanket is the first real lead I've had. I understand loss, Clarissa said quietly, but I've told you everything I know. Then why did you write my daughter's name on the wall last night? Her eyes widened. You were watching me? Why, Clarissa? How do you know her name? The baby began to fuss. As Clarissa picked him up, Michael caught a glimpse of his face in full daylight. The resemblance to Rachel's family was striking. The same high forehead, the delicate nose. I'm going to involve the police, Michael said. The courts. Something in Clarissa snapped. She stood, the baby clutched protectively to her chest. You lost your daughter, and now you want to blame someone, don't you? You need a villain in your story. I need the truth. The truth is, you're not the only one who's suffered, Mr. Big Shot. Some of us lose everything and don't have millions to throw around finding who to blame. You're lying to me, Michael said, stepping closer. You know something about Lily. Get away from me, Clarissa shouted, her free hand connecting with Michael's cheek in a stinging slap. The baby began to wail. Father Tom appeared from nowhere, placing himself between them. I told you not to come back, he said to Michael, his voice like steel. This isn't over, Michael said, backing away. I'll get a court order if I have to. Back home, he stood in Lily's untouched nursery, drowning in memories and what-ifs. He picked up a framed photo of Rachel holding newborn Lily, both wrapped in matching blue blankets. For the first time in years, tears came. Not the controlled grief he'd permitted himself in public, but raw, guttural sobs that bent him double. When the storm passed, he made a decision. The next morning, he drove to the shelter where Clarissa claimed the baby had been left. The intake coordinator looked exhausted but was willing to talk. Yes, I remember when Benjamin was left here. So tiny, just a few days old. Benjamin? That's what Clarissa named him. Such a sweet baby. The woman who brought him in, do you remember her? The coordinator hesitated. She wasn't supposed to tell anyone about that. She studied Michael's face. But yes, I remember. Older woman, kept her face mostly covered. Had a scar, though, right here. She traced a line from her temple to her jaw. Wore a purple scarf. Michael felt his heart rate accelerate. Was her name Marla? The coordinator's eyes widened. How did you know that? Marla. The name echoed in Michael's mind like a distant bell growing louder with each repetition. Marla Evans had worked in their household for years, managing the staff, overseeing renovations, a steady presence with a no-nonsense attitude who had vanished 3 days after Lily's kidnapping. The police had questioned her disappearance but found nothing suspicious, just another dead end in a case full of them. Back in his car, Michael called his assistant. Pull all the files we have on Marla Evans, everything, and find out where Frank Dawson is these days. Frank had been head of security at the Drake Mansion when Lily disappeared. If anyone knew Marla's secrets, it would be him. 2 hours later, Michael sat across from Frank in a booth at a diner in Oak Park. The once imposing security chief had aged poorly, his shoulders hunched, hair gone completely gray. I always knew you'd come asking someday, Frank said, stirring sugar into his coffee. Just thought it would be sooner. Michael slid a photo across the table. Marla from the company Christmas party. Tell me about her. Frank sighed. Marla was running from something when she came to work for you. Never said what. But sometimes she'd get these calls that would leave her shaking. And you never reported this? To who? You were barely home. Mrs. Drake was sick, and Marla did her job well. Until my daughter vanished. Frank's eyes darkened. You think Marla took Lily? No way. That woman loved your daughter like her own. Then why disappear right after the kidnapping? Frank was quiet for a long moment. Her ex-husband found her. violent man. Had connections in bad places. She was terrified of him. He hesitated. I always wondered if he was somehow involved in what happened to Lily. Maybe Marla fled to protect someone. Protect who? Maybe Lily, Frank said quietly. Or herself. The possibility hung in the air between them. Could Marla have taken Lily to protect her from something worse? Michael pushed further. Did Marla have a scar? On her face? Frank's expression changed. Not when she worked for you, but her ex. He threatened to mark her if she ever left. Michael felt cold. I need to find her. Last I heard, she was in Madison. That was years ago. It took 3 days of intense searching, but Michael's team finally traced a woman matching Marla's description to Cicero, a suburb west of Chicago. She'd worked at a local hospital under the name Maria Evans until 2 years ago, when she died in an apartment fire. The hospital hallways were antiseptic and impersonal as Michael followed a nurse to the records department. His credentials as a major hospital donor opening doors that would normally remain closed. Maria Evans, the clerk confirmed, pulling up the file, worked in patient transport for 4 years, kept to herself mostly. Was there anything unusual about her death? The clerk hesitated. Not officially. And unofficially? You didn't hear this from me, but she wasn't alone when they brought her in. There was a girl, teenage, badly burned. They couldn't save either of them. Michael felt the floor tilt beneath him. A teenager? Are you sure? Pretty sure. Joe in the morgue might remember better. He was on duty that night. Joe was a gaunt man with nicotine-stained fingers who spoke in a monotone. Yeah, I remember. Bad scene. Woman and girl, both with severe burns. The girl didn't have ID. No one ever claimed the bodies. How old was the girl? Michael asked, his voice barely audible. Hard to say with the burns. 15? 16 maybe? The age matched. If Lily had survived, if Marla had raised her, there was a baby too, Joe added. Wasn't in the fire, but they found it in the apartment next door. No one knew whose it was. Got put in the system, I guess. Michael gripped the edge of the desk. What happened to the bodies? County burial. Plot 217 at West Lawn Cemetery. An hour later, Michael stood before a small, unmarked grave. The cemetery was quiet, except for the distant sound of traffic and the rustle of leaves. He knelt, touching the bare earth. Was it you? He whispered. Were you here all this time, Lily? No answers came from the silent ground. But as he turned to leave, he noticed an elderly groundskeeper watching him. You knew them, the old man called. Michael approached him. I'm trying to find out who they were. The woman and the girl. The groundskeeper nodded. Woman came here sometimes before the fire. Brought the girl to visit that grave over there. He pointed to a simple headstone several yards away. Always seemed afraid, looking over her shoulder. Michael walked to the indicated grave. The name on the stone made his blood freeze. Rachel Drake. She'd leave blue flowers, the groundskeeper continued. Said blue was her mother's favorite color. Michael's world tilted on its axis as he stared at his wife's headstone, trying to process what the groundskeeper had just revealed. Someone, perhaps his own daughter, had been visiting Rachel's grave. Blue flowers, blue blanket. The connections were too precise to be coincidental. He returned to St. Jude's the next morning, his mind racing with possibilities. But the churchyard was empty of Clarissa's presence. Inside, the community hall bustled with volunteers serving breakfast to a line of people in need, but she wasn't among them. Father Tom emerged from his office, his expression hardening when he spotted Michael. She's not here, he said before Michael could speak, and I'm not telling you where she went. Please, Michael said, hearing the desperation in his own voice. This isn't just about the blanket anymore. I have reason to believe that baby might be my grandson." The priest's eyebrows rose slightly. Grandson? Michael explained what he'd learned. Marla's history, the fire, the teenage girl, the cemetery visits. "That's quite a theory," Father Tom said when he finished. "But even if true, what right does that give you to disrupt Clarissa's life? Or the child's?" "I just want to talk to her," Michael insisted. "I need to understand what happened." Father Tom studied him. "The police came looking for her yesterday. Something about outstanding warrants. Convenient timing." "I had nothing to do with that," Michael said truthfully. "Maybe, maybe not. But she's gone, and that baby needs stability, not your crusade for answers." Michael spent the next 3 days searching. He hired more investigators, checked shelters and hospitals. Nothing. On the 4th day, his phone rang. An unknown number. "Drake," he answered tersely. "It's Rebecca Carter. I'm a social worker with DCFS." The woman's voice was clinical. "I understand you've been looking for Clarissa Wilson." Michael's grip tightened on the phone. "Do you know where she is?" "Ms. Wilson was admitted to Mercy Hospital yesterday following what appears to be a nervous breakdown. The child, Benjamin, is in temporary state custody." "Is she all right?" "That's confidential," Rebecca replied. "But I'm calling because she mentioned your name. Said you might have information about the child's background." They arranged to meet at Rebecca's office downtown. She was younger than her voice suggested, early 30s with sharp eyes that assessed him coolly. "Let me be clear, Mr. Drake," she said once they were seated. "My priority is Benjamin's welfare. If you're claiming some relation to him, you'll need proof." "I believe he may be my grandson," Michael explained, outlining his theory again. Rebecca made notes. "And what exactly do you want?" "I want to help him. And Clarissa." The words surprised him even as he spoke them. "Help how?" "Financial support. A place to live. Whatever they need." Rebecca's expression remained skeptical. "Ms. Wilson refuses to see you. She believes you called the police on her." "I didn't." "Regardless, if you want formal involvement with the child, you'll need DNA testing. And given your emotional state, I'd recommend you consider whether you're stable enough for custody." "What do you mean?" Rebecca's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Drake, you've been obsessively searching for your daughter for 6 years. You've thrown millions at the search. You've maintained her room like a shrine. Are these the actions of someone emotionally equipped to care for a child?" The assessment stung because it contained truth. "I don't want to take Benjamin from Clarissa. I just want to be part of his life." "Then I suggest you step back. Let me handle Clarissa's case. If DNA confirms your relationship, we can discuss visitation later." Michael left, feeling hollow. Outside Rebecca's office, a flicker of movement caught his attention. A photographer across the street, camera trained on him. Before he could react, the man disappeared around a corner. The next morning, his phone exploded with notifications. His face was plastered across tabloid websites. Tech billionaire claims homeless baby as long-lost heir. Drake dynasty drama. Delusional or desperate? Rebecca had sold the story. And now Clarissa would never trust him. He retreated to his penthouse, ignoring calls from the company board, from friends, from his PR team. Hours passed in a fog of anger and betrayal, until a knock at his door roused him. It was his assistant, looking concerned. "Sir, there's someone here to see you. Says it's about Marla Evans." An elderly woman stood in his living room, clutching a battered shoebox. "I'm Rose Evans," she said without preamble. "Marla was my daughter." Her eyes, though clouded with cataracts, held the same determined expression Michael remembered in Marla. "You've been asking questions," she continued, digging up the past. I need to know what happened to my daughter, Michael said. Rose's weathered face showed a flicker of pity. Sit down, Mr. Drake. It's time you knew the truth. She placed the box on the coffee table between them. Marla left this with me. Said if anything happened to her, I should burn it. She gave a dry laugh. Never was good at following directions. Michael stared at the box. What's inside? The answers you've been looking for. But I warn you, some truths don't bring the peace we hope for. With trembling hands, Michael lifted the lid. The first item Michael lifted from the box was a pair of tiny, charred baby shoes. The sight of them made his stomach clench. Tangible evidence of a life interrupted, of futures erased. He set them carefully on the table, unable to look away. Beneath them lay a folded paper, yellowed with age. He recognized Rachel's handwriting immediately, flowing script that curved across the page in a prayer she'd written during her pregnancy. Watch over our Lily. Guide her path through darkness into light. Keep her safe when we cannot. The third item stopped his breath entirely. A DNA test, dated 6 years ago, just weeks after Lily's disappearance. It compared 2 samples, Subject A and Subject B. The conclusion: parent and child. Rose watched him silently as realization washed over his face. Marla took her, Michael whispered, the confirmation of his suspicions bringing no satisfaction, only hollow certainty. She stole my daughter. It wasn't that simple, Rose said, her voice heavy with old grief. Marla never meant to keep her forever. She was trying to protect her. From what? Rose sighed. From whom, you mean? Her ex-husband, Victor. He'd found her, threatened her. Said he'd take what mattered most to her, just like she'd taken his life away by leaving. So she took my daughter. How does that make sense? Victor had someone inside your house. The new babysitter was his cousin. They planned to take Lily, use her to extort money from you. Then Rose couldn't finish the sentence. So Marla took her first, Michael said, the pieces falling into place. To save her from them. Rose nodded. She fled with Lily that night, changed both their names, kept moving for years. Why didn't she come to me? I would have protected them. Victor had connections everywhere. Police, FBI. She couldn't risk it. Rose looked down at her gnarled hands. She tried to contact Rachel once, to let her know Lily was safe. But by then, Rachel was already gone, Michael finished, remembering how his wife had slipped away, believing her child was suffering or worse. Marla raised Lily as her own granddaughter, called her Ellie. They were happy, as much as they could be, always looking over their shoulders. Michael's mind raced ahead. The fire? Was it an accident? Rose's eyes darkened. Victor finally found them. Marla had just enough warning to get Lily's baby to the neighbor before he arrived. Lily's baby? The words felt strange in Michael's mouth. Benjamin is actually your great-grandson, Rose confirmed. Lily was 16 when she had him. Never said who the father was. The weight of it all threatened to crush him. His daughter had lived, had grown up, had given birth, and had died saving her child, all without him ever knowing she was alive. The fire inspector ruled it arson, Rose continued. Victor didn't survive either. They found his body in the hallway. Michael closed his eyes, trying to process everything. When he opened them, he noticed something else in the box. A small silver cross, partially melted. Lily wore that always, Rose said. Marla gave it to her on her 10th birthday, said it was to remind her that she was watched over. Michael picked it up, feeling its weight in his palm. All these years, he whispered, I've been searching, and she was just living, growing up without me. She knew about you, Rose said gently. Marla never lied about who her real parents were. That's why they visited your wife's grave. Lily wanted some connection to her birth family. Did she hate me? The question escaped before he could stop it. No, Rose said. She was curious, confused sometimes. But Marla always spoke well of you both. Michael clutched the cross, feeling its edges dig into his palm. And Clarissa? How does she fit into all this? Marla met her at a rehab center 2 years ago. Clarissa was trying to get clean, had no family. They became close. After the fire, I couldn't take the baby. My health was too poor. So we found Clarissa. She'd promised Marla she'd care for him if anything happened. Michael stood abruptly, walking to the window. The city spread out below him, millions of lives intersecting, secrets buried within each one. His daughter had been out there all this time, living her life in shadows. He thought of Benjamin, his great-grandson, the last living piece of Lily and Rachel. "What do you want, Mr. Drake?" Rose asked quietly. The question stopped him. What did he want? Revenge? Justice? His old life back? None of those were possible now. "I want to honor my daughter's choice," he said finally. "She trusted Clarissa with her son. I need to respect that." He turned back to face Rose. "But I also want to be part of Benjamin's life, to give him the security Lily never had." Rose nodded slowly. "Then you have a hard road ahead. Clarissa doesn't trust you. The system doesn't favor even wealthy men with obsessive tendencies." "I'll find a way," Michael said, determination hardening within him. After Rose left, he drove to the site of the fire in Cicero. The apartment building had been partially rebuilt, but the unit where Marla and Lily had died remained a charred shell, sealed off with plywood and warning signs. He stood on the sidewalk, looking up at the blackened windows, imagining his daughter's final moments. Had she been afraid? Had she thought of him? In the vacant lot next door, something caught his eye. A small wooden cross staked into the ground. Someone had painted the initials LD on it in white. Michael fell to his knees before it, overcome. For the first time since this began, he felt something beyond grief and rage and determination. He felt regret, pure, unfiltered regret for all the moments he hadn't been there, all the chances lost, all the love he'd never been able to give. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the empty air. "I'm so sorry, Lily." The words felt inadequate, but they were all he had to offer now. Morning light streamed through the blinds of Michael's modest two-bedroom apartment in Evanston. Gone were the sleek minimalist furnishings of his penthouse, replaced by comfortable, child-friendly pieces in warm colors. A far cry from the steel and glass fortress where he'd imprisoned himself for years. He sipped coffee at the small kitchen table, reviewing paperwork for the children's shelter where he now volunteered 3 days a week. The Drake Foundation had become his primary focus after stepping down as CEO of Drake Technologies, a move that had shocked the business world and sent stocks plummeting temporarily. His phone buzzed with a text from Clarissa. "Still okay for 2 p.m.? "Of course," he replied. "Looking forward to it." The road to this peaceful moment had been anything but smooth. After his confrontation with the truth about Lily, Michael had undergone a transformation that surprised even himself. Instead of fighting for custody or control, he'd channeled his resources toward helping Clarissa regain stability. He'd worked with a different social worker, one with no interest in tabloid money, to establish a trust for Benjamin that would provide for his needs without giving Michael any legal authority. He'd found Clarissa a modest house in a good neighborhood, paying the rent anonymously through a foundation. For 6 months, he'd kept his distance, respecting her need for space and time to heal. His only connection came through monthly updates from the social worker, until the day Clarissa had called him. Benjamin keeps asking about the man with sad eyes, she'd said. I think maybe you should visit. Just once. Once had become twice, then regular weekend afternoons. Always on Clarissa's terms, always with her present. Slowly, warily, they'd built something like trust. Michael checked his watch. Hours yet before he'd see them. He headed to the children's shelter, where he'd started a reading program for kids waiting to be placed in foster homes. The work grounded him in a way running a tech empire never had. Later, driving to Clarissa's house, he stopped to buy flowers. Not for her, but for the small memorial garden they'd planted for Lily in the backyard. It had been his idea, but Clarissa had embraced it, saying Benjamin should know about his mother. Clarissa opened the door before he could knock. Benjamin balanced on her hip. At 20 months, he was a bundle of energy and curiosity, with Rachel's eyes and Lily's smile. A living bridge between past and future. Hey, she said, stepping back to let him in. He's been asking for Mikey all morning. Michael smiled at the toddler, who reached for him immediately. The first time Benjamin had done that, Michael had broken down in tears. Now, he took the boy with practiced ease. Hey, buddy, he said softly. What adventures are we having today? Ducks, Benjamin announced, pointing toward the backyard where a small inflatable pool awaited. Clarissa watched them with a guarded smile. At 30, she looked younger than when he'd first met her. The haunted look in her eyes gradually replaced by cautious hope. She'd completed her GED and started community college courses in social work. He's been obsessed with ducks since you took him to the park last week, she said, following them outside. Their relationship remained complex, neither friendship nor family in any traditional sense, but bound by Benjamin and by the shared love they'd each had for Lily in their own ways. As Benjamin splashed happily in the shallow water, Michael placed the flowers by the small stone marker they'd set in the garden. Lily Drake, forever safe. I've been thinking, Clarissa said hesitantly. Maybe it's time we tell him more. Not everything, but something. Michael looked at her in surprise. They'd agreed to wait until Benjamin was older to explain his complicated history. What changed your mind? Clarissa watched the boy playing. Yesterday, he found a photo I keep of Marla and Lily. He pointed at Lily and said, Mama. I don't know how he knew. Michael felt a familiar ache. Kids sense things we don't understand. It's not just that. He's starting to look so much like her. And he has these moments where he'll stare at nothing and smile, like he's seeing someone we can't. They sat in silence for a moment, watching Benjamin, who was completely absorbed in making his rubber duck swim in circles. I kept everything from him for so long, Michael said quietly. I don't want to make the same mistake with Benjamin. Clarissa nodded. We'll find the right words when it's time. After dinner, as Benjamin began to tire, he crawled into Michael's lap with a picture book. Halfway through the story, he looked up at Michael with serious eyes. You have Mama's eyes, he said, with the simple clarity of a child. Michael froze, looking to Clarissa, who seemed equally stunned. What did you say, sweetie? She asked gently. He has Mama's eyes, Benjamin repeated, patting Michael's cheek with a small hand. Michael swallowed hard. Your Mama was very special, he managed to say. I know, Benjamin said, then yawned widely and snuggled closer. Later, after Benjamin was asleep, Clarissa walked Michael to the door. That was... She shook her head, unable to find the words. Yeah, Michael agreed. I never told him about Rachel or Lily having the same eyes. Neither did I. Clarissa hesitated. Sometimes I think Marla was right. That there are things watching over us we can't see. Michael wasn't sure what he believed anymore, but looking back at the small house where his great-grandson slept peacefully, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Faith. Not in any god or system, but in the resilience of family bonds, however broken and reformed. "She had the heart I never knew how to have," he said softly, remembering Lily's sacrifice. Clarissa touched his arm briefly, the first time she'd initiated contact. "She got it from somewhere, Michael. Don't forget that." Muscle. As he drove home through the quiet streets, Michael felt the weight of his daughter's absence. But alongside it, for the first time, there was also peace. Autumn painted Chicago in fiery hues as Michael helped Benjamin feed ducks at the Lincoln Park Lagoon. At 3 years old, the boy had grown into a sturdy, curious child with an infectious laugh and thoughtful eyes that sometimes seemed to hold wisdom beyond his years. "Careful. Don't fall in," Michael cautioned as Benjamin leaned precariously over the water's edge, determined to reach the smallest duckling. "I won't, Grandpa," Benjamin replied, using the name they'd finally settled on 6 months earlier. Neither Michael nor great-grandfather had felt right, and Grandpa bridged the generational gap in a way that honored Lily's place in their unusual family. Nearby, Clarissa sat on a bench, textbooks spread around her as she studied for her social work certification. The past 2 years had transformed her as much as they had Michael. Where once there had been wariness between them, now there was a partnership of sorts. Two people bound not by blood or choice, but by circumstances neither could have imagined. "Look!" Benjamin pointed excitedly as a large swan glided majestically toward them, sending the ducks scattering. "He's the king," Michael smiled. "I think you're right." Very regal. As they walked back to Clarissa, Benjamin's small hand in his, Michael felt the familiar pang of wondering how different things might have been if Lily had known such simple pleasures with him. Clarissa looked up from her books, shielding her eyes against the late afternoon sun. "Good timing. I need to show you both something." Back at her house, she disappeared into her bedroom, returning with a small wooden box. Michael recognized it immediately. It was the one that had held Marla's revelations. "I've been thinking about this for a while," Clarissa said, setting it on the coffee table. "Benjamin's getting older, starting to ask questions. I think it's time we created something more permanent for Lily." She opened the box, revealing the blue blanket, now carefully preserved in a sealed bag. "I don't feel right keeping this," she said quietly. "It was Rachel's creation, for Lily. It should be somewhere they both can be remembered." Michael stared at the blanket, its color still vibrant despite the years. "What are you suggesting?" "I found a place," Clarissa said. "A small memorial garden outside the church, where we first met. Father Tom has offered a corner of it for us to plant a tree for Lily. Maybe place a small plaque." The gesture moved Michael deeply. "You'd want that?" "Benjamin needs somewhere to connect with his mother's memory. Somewhere real." She hesitated. "And I thought, maybe you could bring something of Rachel's too, so they can be together again." The following Sunday, they gathered in the small garden behind St. Jude's. Father Tom, now using a cane but still commanding in his presence, led a simple, non-denominational ceremony. A few of Clarissa's friends from the church attended, along with Rose Evans in a wheelchair. Benjamin, dressed in his best clothes, watched solemnly as Michael and Clarissa took turns digging the hole for the young maple sapling. "This tree will grow tall and strong," Father Tom explained to Benjamin, "just like your mom would have wanted you to." When the tree was planted, Michael placed the folded blue blanket in a waterproof container at its base. "This was made by your grandmother Rachel for your mother Lily," he explained to Benjamin, who nodded with the serious concentration of a child trying to understand adult matters. "And this," Clarissa added, placing Lily's partially melted cross beside it, "your mother wore every day to remember she was loved." Michael then added his contribution, a small silver locket that had belonged to Rachel, containing a wisp of Lily's baby hair and a tiny photo of mother and daughter. As they covered these treasures with soil, Benjamin suddenly spoke up. "Can I put something too?" From his pocket, he pulled a slightly crushed dandelion. "It's a wish flower," he explained. "For Mama." Michael and Clarissa exchanged glances, both blinking back tears as Benjamin carefully placed the dandelion in the earth. They stood in silence as Father Tom said a few more words. When the small ceremony ended, the others drifted away, leaving just the three of them before the newly planted tree. Benjamin tugged at the blanket Michael had brought for him, not the original blue one, but a similar shade Clarissa had found. "Looks like mine," he said, pointing to the container they'd just buried. Clarissa squeezed his hand. "Yes, it does." "Did my mama make this one too?" he asked, finger tracing the edge of his blanket. "No, sweetheart," Clarissa answered. "But she wanted you to have one just like hers." Michael watched them, this small family forged through tragedy and healing. Clarissa met his gaze over Benjamin's head, and without words, an understanding passed between them. A recognition of how far they'd come and how they would continue, together in their separate ways, to honor the love that bound them. She reached out her hand. After a moment's hesitation, Michael took it. Benjamin, seeing this, grabbed both their hands, completing the circle. No words were spoken. None were needed. In that moment of silent connection, the past and present merged, and for the first time, Michael felt not just the pain of what he'd lost, but the fullness of what remained. 14 years later, the auditorium of Evanston High School buzzed with anticipation as families gathered for the annual Voices of Hope charity event benefiting children in foster care. Banners proclaiming "Building Bridges, Finding Families" hung from the walls. Michael Drake, now in his 60s, silver-haired but still straight-backed, slipped quietly into a seat in the back row. Though he could have easily claimed a place of honor, the Drake Foundation was the event's major sponsor. He preferred to watch from a distance. His phone vibrated with a text from Clarissa. "He's nervous, keeps fixing his tie." Michael smiled. Benjamin, at 17, had inherited his mother's determination and his great-grandmother's gentle spirit. The boy who had once played with rubber ducks had grown into a thoughtful young man with a passion for social justice and a gift for public speaking. Tonight, Benjamin had been selected to give the keynote address about his experiences growing up in what he called his constellation family. Not traditional, but full of light and connection. The auditorium lights dimmed. A woman in a blazer approached the podium and introduced Benjamin Drake Wilson, whose dual surname honored both sides of his unusual heritage. Benjamin stepped onto the stage, tall and composed in a navy suit. Michael felt the familiar ache of recognition. Those were Rachel's eyes, Lily's smile, looking out from a face that carried echoes of generation. "Good evening," Benjamin began, his voice steady. "When I was asked to speak about adoption and foster care, I realized my story isn't exactly typical. I wasn't adopted in the traditional sense, but I was chosen, repeatedly, by people who had every reason to turn away." He paused, scanning the audience. "My mother, Lily, was only 16 when she had me. I never knew her. She died saving other children from a fire when I was just a baby." A hush fell over the crowd. "But before she died, she made arrangements for me. She chose someone she trusted, a woman named Clarissa, to raise me if anything happened to her." Michael watched Clarissa in the front row, her posture straight, eyes glistening. "Clarissa was fighting her own battles when I came into her life," Benjamin continued. "She had every reason to say no, but she chose me. She fought for me. She built her life around giving me a home." He smiled slightly. "And then there was a man who could have disrupted everything. a wealthy businessman who discovered I existed by chance. He had the resources and influence to take me away if he'd wanted to. Michael tensed, remembering how close he'd come to doing exactly that. Instead, he chose to support us from a distance, to help without controlling, to be present without demanding. He never once said he was my great-grandfather, but he always looked at me like I was the most important person in his world. Benjamin's eyes found Michael in the back row, their gazes locked across the distance. What I've learned from my Constellation family is that love isn't just about blood or legal documents. It's about choices made daily, often at great personal cost. It's about seeing beyond yourself to what a child needs most. As Benjamin continued, weaving his personal story with broader points about family support systems, Michael felt a weight lifting. The last vestiges of regret and might-have-beens dissolving into pride for the young man before him. After the speech ended to thunderous applause, Michael waited in the lobby while Benjamin was surrounded by well-wishers. He fingered the worn edge of the small blue fabric square in his pocket, a cutting from the original blanket that he'd carried every day since the memorial ceremony. Finally, the crowd thinned. Benjamin spotted him and broke into a wide smile. "You came," he said, crossing the lobby in a few long strides. "I wouldn't have missed it," Michael replied simply. Benjamin searched his face. "I wasn't sure if what I said about you being my great-grandfather, if that was okay." "It was perfect," Michael assured him. "I'm honored to be claimed by you, Benjamin." The young man surprised him with a fierce hug. "I had this whole speech prepared for you about college applications and the internship program. But right now, I just want to say thank you for everything." Michael returned the embrace, thinking of the long, winding path that had led them here. The pain and loss, the misunderstandings and revelations, the slow, careful building of trust across years. "I've never left," Michael said softly, "and I never will." As they walked out together to meet Clarissa for dinner, Michael let the small square of blue fabric slip from his pocket, falling unnoticed to the polished floor behind them. He didn't need it anymore. The connection it represented was no longer something he had to hold on to. It lived in Benjamin's smile, in Clarissa's hard-won trust, in the foundation that helped children like the one Lily had once been. For the first time in 20 years, Michael Drake walked forward unburdened by the past, smiling at the future that had emerged from his deepest loss. A future built not on revenge or blame, but on the quiet redemption of a man who had learned at last to let love guide him home. In the end, it wasn't wealth, justice, or even the truth that brought peace. It was love in silence, a silent child, a worn blanket, a grandfather who arrived too late, but stayed. Life doesn't always give second chances, but it sometimes offers something just as powerful, the chance to be different. What would you do if your past knocked on your window today? And what did you feel watching this story? If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Click the bell to receive notifications. Leave your like and tell us in the comments which country or city you're from. That helps us bring you even more meaningful and touching stories. And now, click on the final card to watch the next recommended story. Thank you for being with us.